question.
There you go. There you
That
go.
is
I probably don't need the answer because when I just have to sneeze 3 times every day. Um, that's what that's what the front of my face keeps thinking. So as I've just got to, and I'm thinking, I used to really have just those tough allergies. Being a teacher, you think in terms of September through June, and it was always right around the end of May that I would plan a field trip, the last field trip of the year. And one of those times, the allergies just grabbed me, and I, I literally just my wonderful parents who were all going on this great field trip to the zoo with the kids, and I just was like, I just can't make it's not going to work. I had what I call I don't have a box of Kleenex right now, but face in box disease, and I just had the box right here, like it was just like, oh, I can't get the Kleenex out fast enough. So, what a lovely way to start the show. I'm talking about sneezing and coughing, but that isn't why you're here. I have a better way to start this. Dan, would you believe that I got a message this morning from someone else who has not been my guest before? But they said, hey, maybe Dan Cohen can come. And I thought, I can't wait until Dan's on the screen. So, Dan, this person does not live in the United States, and they are in a completely different time zone. And I'm actually recording with them thanks to my hubby producer, D. Scott Smith, motivational listener. He said yes. And so this Saturday, it would be 4 p.m. Pacific time for me. I will be recording with that person and one other. And so, can you guess who this man is?
Is he from Australia?
Yes, you got him.
Maury.
Yes, it is. Maury Voicey Barlin? Is that?
Maury is a gem in our world. He is a gem because he uses comedy
Yeah.
and and music, and he combines and his deep knowledge of sort of the person and such to reach people who and I wish everybody followed him, knew him, watched his videos.
Yes.
It's just like others who we know, who are sort of people we look to as models. But he's got his own space, a little bit unique, and
Very. Yes.
and I mean, he was once part of like almost 100, actors who learned dementia care and went into nursing homes and worked with folks from a whole different perspective and sort of, sort of outfits that was sort of special to the culture, and it was pretty cool. So anyway, so Maury, yes, that's wonderful.
So, and you were able to guess, maybe because I said a completely different time zone.
No, because I
And
did see on his last
Oh,
post your name pop up, and I said, wonderful. I was going to mention it.
you've
It's
got it
great.
figured
Small
out.
world. Small world.
And I'm just like, who else? I mean, he was like, oh, let's get together. Let's have a party. And that's why I invited you back. Patty and Laura, you know each other. Dan, have you met either
No,
Laura or
great.
Patty, or even know what they're about?
No, I just looked at Laura's website, which is great, and
Yes.
important work. And Patty, I'm just delighted to learn.
Hello, it's nice to meet you.
Hi.
I'm
Yay.
thrilled to be here. I'm such a fan of the Alive Inside movie or documentary. It's made such an impact on the work I've done and memory care, and then now with family caregivers. So it's an honor to be meeting you.
Look, my pleasure. I mean, it's we know it takes all of us and more, right? We need more to move the
Yes.
needle. You know,
Yes.
we know the impact we're having with the people we interact with, but they're just for every one we do, there are 100 that are not getting what they need in a big way, right?
And it's
Very true.
completely, I think, an issue of getting the word out. I know you may be familiar with Norm McNamara, who is in the UK, and he's giving away MP3 players to people with dementia, and calling up care facilities, and just people aren't. Right now, he was just sharing some stuff here recently about how people aren't taking him up on it, and I know over time he's reached a lot of people that way, but there's certainly a lot more people who need it, and the more that we can just spread the word that it's available. His are only for people in the UK, I believe, but yeah, just letting people know how impactful it is and that it's also available as well. So
Well, the music, is he related to Playlist for Life in UK?
I don't know if he is. I think it's the Purple Angels, I think.
Okay, I've heard of that. Great. I mean, it's just like in the North Carolina Dementia Alliance. They will give any family, they'll set up an MP3 player with their favorite music. They'll test it out over Zoom to make sure the songs the family came up with really are good.
Nice.
The Alzheimer's Society of Toronto, for 8 years, they've given out like 8,000 MP3 players to anyone who lives in Toronto and beyond. And they still do it, because of the feedback they get. This has become an essential component of their work. And I only hope one day that every dementia support organization just makes this you've got to do this kind of thing, because and I even heard somebody's doing some research around nurses versus other people at home who are setting up music, and nurses tend to have more persistence in making it happen because they know, bottom line, it will work. So if at first they don't have the right music, or there's not a response, no, keep trying, because no guarantee you'll get there. But they know they've read the research. They know that it's going to work, so that they're more likely to be successful. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, and probably have been more likely to have actually seen it, for ourselves as well. To see, I remember one man in my memory care he could be pretty, distressed, and we would put on a MP3 player, and he would start, just conducting, and get lost in the opera and just would conduct, and he would just have this big grin on his face. It was just amazing. So once you get to experience that, even once or twice, then it really can help fill the motivation to persist through some of the barriers of finding, or even just when you're inundated with so many things that you have to do, how do you prioritize, this over that? And so,
And it's
yeah,
getting
absolutely.
easier. People can use the smart speakers. What I do
Mm-hmm.
for myself is I say, play the top songs from, when I was 10 or 11 or 12. It doesn't have to be just college, because actually somebody did a data dump of Spotify and what older people listen to, and they listen mostly to music from when they were 10 to 14 or 15. And they listen to music from when they were 20 half as often as from music from when they were 10 to 15. So,
Interesting.
and I think that's that music, that earlier music, which you don't think about so much. I now listen to, like, I'm moved a little extra. There's a little extra juice in it, because that's when hormones are starting, or all of the relationship kind of stuff with friends and people is different than it's eye opening, and somehow your longer term, you have more long term memories that stick, and the music gets associated with the memories, blah blah blah. So yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, my son is 11 right now, and he's just starting to really get into music and finding the music that he likes, and he's making his own MP3 player. And so, of course, it'll be easier when he's, 95 to he'll have already made his. Who knows what the technology will be then? But Yeah, it's just so powerful. Do
With a
you, Jan?
mom like Laura, to be like, son, don't archive this.
Right.
Believe me, your wife, your kids, your grandkids are going to be like, oh, this is exactly. I mean, he starts to smile every time, he starts to interact with us, etc. Patty, I noticed a moment ago you were waving. Were you waving at Janice
Yes,
at
you
her
had
comment?
you said good morning, so I figured I'd
Yes.
wave.
I love that. Now, were you just being kind, or were you being friendly to someone you already have interacted with?
I guess just saying hi. I don't know Janice personally. I don't think so.
Oh, she's only a few hours from you.
Oh,
She's in the Portland area. So I
oh,
thought, oh, these
excellent.
two have already seen each other at a conference or a trade show or
Oh, if
something.
it's the Janice that I'm thinking of, maybe I do know her.
Oh, good. She can let us know. It's like, yes, Patty, remember
Yeah,
we were at the such and such in
is
2019.
right? Is she part of the Lego community? Then I definitely do know her. I just don't recognize her last name.
She might want to be. This is actually a really good moment for me to plug that anybody who goes to agingbetternetwork.com, if you look for live stream video, my husband has archived that live stream video, and you can see the thumbnails. I always call them screenshots, but you can see a picture there and go, okay. And I think it might be Shokrian. And so she's been on there. So then you can see what she's about. I have to go back to that all the time going, what did that person say? They were wearing purple. Oh my goodness, what was it? Back to it. But hi, Janice. Thank you so much. Busy people are on this show. So I know that you have all sculpted out at this hour just because you would like to say names like Norm McNamara. Am I saying that correctly, Laura?
I believe that's correct.
And why would someone not take advantage of that free thing? My first thought is they just don't see the value in it. It's like I turn on music, but that doesn't seem to help my loved one, or there's always music playing at the community where I go to visit someone. I'm not sure what the big deal is or something. Why would you turn something down that is free? Because the word isn't getting out, because people just don't realize that a person with dementia can not only have a physical easing in their body when they hear that familiar sound, but it also gives them back communication, because I have seen that happen. The silent person who finds their words again, or is mimicking you because there is something in music. And I think that's why it's so important. People want to hear their song their way. They don't want the remake, they want the original. There was supposed to be a hi-hat right then, bum bum bum. Oh, that's a remake. I want to hear the original. There's a lot of emotion that goes into it, and isn't just preference, it's activating a part of the brain. And now I am completely outside of my realm of information. Dan, your stuff. And that's why Maury Voicey Barlin was going, oh, maybe he can come in on our conversation, because we'll be recording at a different time for someone who lives in New South Wales. Janice said, I am not part of the Lego community. So you have your work cut out for you, Patty. However, I do have my Lego sets from my childhood. So she would be all over this. I am so glad that you two are meeting, or possibly reacquainting today. Steve Berger said, the collective effort of the Aging Better community is the tide that will raise all ships. It makes me think of the Panama Canal, that how they close those big doors or whatever and raise the ships so that they will match the level of the sea on the other side. how is it that the sea is at a different level on each side of our continent? That's somebody else's show. I'm sure that this has been explained somewhere. I can't be the only one who wonders. Inquiring minds want to know. Inquiring minds want to know. Patty Sharon, I'm so excited to see you again. It's been a couple of years. We both met thanks to Denise Brown, and that she invites people in and says, talk about what you're doing, because these people are family caregivers. They are hired to be caregivers, in families, in homes, in hallways. I always say hallways when there's like a room on each side. And you've been to those hallways and into those activity arenas. And when we talk about Maury, who will be um, aired, I guess. We'll put him on the screen in the future. I can easily bounce to Patty Sharon, because what you're doing is animated and it's interactive, and it gives people a way to communicate who seem to have lost that through the years. So, Patty, let Dan know what you're about.
So years ago, I used to go to memory care communities, and I brought Duplo as a way of engagement because, as we've been discussing, I'm a huge fan of Lego, and it was a huge hit. Of course, the pandemic changed everything, and I decided to start writing my book to share my experience with that community. And that's when I met Denise. When I first, after my first couple of drafts of my book, and I realized that I wanted to shift focus and work with caregivers, right? Because at the time I had heard a terrible stat of spouses dying before the person with dementia. Now I hear that stat is changing, and because we're bringing, so many people are bringing awareness to family members that, self-care is not a luxury but a necessity, right? So thank goodness that stat is going down, but still, it's important. So that's why I wrote the book. It's about self-care, developing good support systems, and then using Lego as a way of helping caregivers stop doing and just being, right? Just take an hour of your day and just be in the moment. So Lego, I love Lego. Lego is a great medium and a great tool to allow people to communicate in a different way, get out of their heads, and use muscle memory to just be creative and express themselves.
And if you were to join together the Lego engagement with music. So music research shows that people cut their caregiver stress gets cut in half.
Yes.
So the music isn't just for the person living with dementia. Music is very much a benefit for the care partner, right? So and then you blend things, right? So because I know that Angel, I don't know if you know Angel Duncan, creative arts therapist, and she developed memories for the making in terms of using watercolor paint and such. And she has experience with people with the painting. At one point, they put down the brush; they can no longer do it as their dementia advances. But then one day, she learned what music they liked. She put on a headphone. 6, 8, 9 months later, they picked up the brush again and were able to continue with the music playing.
Yes.
So
yes.
Again, extend out that that capability, right, and that enjoyment and that sense of self. So all sorts of stuff that is just waiting to be tapped. And I love the Legos idea. I really
we sorry to interrupt, but we also have a chapter in our book talking about music and the importance of music, because I've seen it, like Christine and Laura were saying, I've seen it time and time again in memory care communities where someone had lost their ability for communication, and then hospice would bring in a musician, and they would play their favorite songs, and then they would just start having a conversation, and you'd be like, where did this come from? So yeah, I mean, I
Wow.
didn't my participants didn't have individual music, but I tried to mix up the music when we had a session, and I highly encourage that, because of course I've seen that time again. You play their favorite music, whoever is in the room, and you can see them happier, bouncing around, being more inquisitive for the pieces. And yeah, so it was definitely, I definitely highly recommend music um, when doing this type of activity. And of course, I mean, yesterday I had a really stressful day, and I came home last night and I just put on my favorite music, and immediately, like, I'm in a better mood, right? So
Mm.
like you said, Dan, it's not just folks with Alzheimer's and dementia, it's everybody, right? And I was a big fan of that movie too, Alive Inside. It was a great movie.
Thanks.
Alive Inside. Okay,
Yeah.
I've seen it as well. So we all have something in common right now. Dan, what precipitated that? I mean, like, those kind of like documentary behind, you find out, how did this film even happen? Oh, it almost didn't, or whatever. Did you initiate it? Did you go to a person and say, I would love for you to come in and see what is happening and document this before it's lost?
Well, that's exactly, what happened. I was frustrated that I was
That's
getting
right.
these great reactions, and people, even my friends, when I started, I was doing it as a volunteer. And I tell family or friends, oh, blah, 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 this is what I'm seeing. And they go, oh, how nice, Dan, you're bringing the old people music, like end of discussion.
Right.
And I thought,
So
I'm not, it's like people, it's like, show me the Missouri, whatever, they have to see it for themselves. The verbal description of music is great just doesn't change policy or change professional engagement approaches, right? So, and I was fortunate enough to have been introduced to some small family foundation in New York City, and they said, "Oh, we know a filmmaker who worked with us, and we'll pay for him to come in for an afternoon." And that happened to be Henry, and that became the most viewed video on anything related to dementia globally at 50 million views now. And then I said to the filmmaker, we have to try. I have other stories of other people I'm working with in other facilities. And then he said, we got all these people. Let's make a documentary. And so then it went from there.
Wow.
It was really just people. And the unexpected outcome of this movie was not just about the music, but a very powerful part was that people sort of crossed that threshold of the stigma and giving up on stigma and go, oh no, they're just like us. This could be me. I'll be no different when I can't remember things or my behavior changes a bit or whatever. And so it really helped. It's the first line of defense when you're trying to convince someone, just the way we love it, people who are not familiar with this stuff, except maybe, now they have a relative that they're trying to do their best with, or in any situation, classes. So it's used in middle schools to medical schools around the world as a way to, because people are graduating, nurses, doctors, social workers, there's very little talk of dementia. There's zero talk on non-pharmacological approaches to care. And so then when they meet their first person with, some serious, so somewhere along the journey, they have all of their misconceptions. They have advanced dementia. They're in bed. Nothing we could do for them. Why bother? Right? They're gone.
Mhm.
And so we need to have a sort of the way we have Psych 101, everybody gets in college. There has to be sort of non-pharm 101. Here are ways, and here's the research, and here's how to integrate this. And so that's my goal, one of them, we can't make big changes in how we care unless everybody understands. So it's not only, it's the future healthcare professionals, the current, but also the general public's understanding of connection of music and dementia. And what I hope is that Thanksgiving or whatever, when everybody's around the table, the grandkid says, oh, grandma, has anybody given her music? Because the kids know. So that's why your 11-year-old, Laura, this is important. Yes, this is a lifelong, make your music, keep it, hold on to it, change it up. You'll love to look back on what music songs you listen to for yourself, and it also teach you how to create the list, not just the streaming, world, but
Right.
to have a place where it all resides. And then for you yourself, look at how you respond differently to your top 200 songs that you listen to versus what's streaming. And, oh, okay, this is good. I like that sort of. Or maybe how often do they skip? Be sort of cognizant of, how many songs, because we listen to 1.3 million songs on average in the US in our lifetime. And Americans listen to over 3 hours of music per day. And 62% of Americans say they consider this essential to their mental health, listening to their own music. Like stats that these are generated by some global, the industry tracks this kind of stuff. So it's by country also. And of course, when you're older, it's not, you're not the 3 hours a day, it's much less, right? The frequency, but that has to do, I believe, to a great degree, is people, they can't operate the equipment. Things have changed. They can't operate their own record player. Years ago, the knob broke off. Streaming, forget about it, or the grandkid comes in and says, oh, here's how I do it. Let's listen. And then they leave, and then they're gone. And then there's no, or they say, yes, I understand how to use my iPad or my, or listen to Spotify, or you set up an account for me, but then they leave and they can't really do it. So we have to be focused, not just on, oh, good, the music. I love it. Perfect background and singing away. And, but who's going to set this up? Who's going to make sure that they have their music every day or as often as they want it? And reporting back to everybody, how's that going? And how's it going?
Absolutely. And I'm happy to see that there are, the industry is starting to respond with some easier to use music playing devices, nice big, very simple ones that people are able to just, push play and stop. I think one of the limitations with the MP3 players is kind of there's can be small, and that can be a little bit hard for some people, but there's starting to be more and more options out there that make it more accessible, for sure. But I totally agree that just that shift and just understanding, and let's not just wait till we happen to think of putting on music, but let's make that we take our medicine, we turn on our music, we take our drink of, fiber or like whatever it is, like just get it into the routine, so that we're benefiting from it on a regular basis, for sure.
Wow. Routine. It makes a difference in sleep habits, and sleep habits make a difference in the routine of waking. I love that. Take your medicine, take your music, make sure that you take a drink of water. It is truly medicinal. Not, oh, wouldn't that be great if that would, be of help today, to use it medicinally. Dan, you've talked about that too, that there would be a prescription of how much or when, or if you're approaching maybe having to get into a car. And so here's, I don't know, the music that helps psych them up for a change in the routine or something like that. Am I close to anything that has been discovered?
I was with someone in Staten Island, where it's a little hilly in New York City, and it was filming for a TV kind of thing, and they did the filming inside, and then we went out to go to get some pizza, and I said, well, let's try. And there were a few steps down to get to the car for this couple, both older. She was pretty advanced, and she would sort of shuffle along, and he would have to lift her legs into their SUV. So we put the headphones on, we played the music. She walked down the steps, one past the other quickly, and she swung her feet in, and only because she was listening to the music on the way. Or a nursing home, another totally different thing, but sort of related, tracked in the morning when people had their music. They measured that people got up and ready to go in half the time. So if everybody's like, well, things aren't moving along and it's a little frustrating, perhaps, oh yeah, music, yeah, let's wash, let's let's get going. Let's get dressed. Let's eat. Um, the mood, helps the transitions, the ADL stuff. Really, no matter what it is, it may work sometimes, it may not work another. I mean, but it's a tool.
Right.
Once it learn how to when it works, I mean, in nursing homes, I mean, it's pre, um, you know, um, shift change or sundowning. I don't know if we use that word anymore. But yeah, it helps people keep calm as there might be a tendency to get distressed. And so,
Right.
visiting doctor's offices. I mean, just all of these stories is just true, where they couldn't go in in the waiting room, sort of too, um,
Loud.
beat whatever, too much, can't
Too
sit
much
down or
stimulation.
pay attention or let the doctor do what they had to do. They had to leave.
Yes.
Yeah.
And next time they came in, they have the headphones in, they put them on the parking lot, mother and daughter, or daughter for mother. And then they went in, and now mom is singing in the waiting room, and everything went smooth. So it's these things that help the caregiver, and and for caregivers, helps what they say. It helps them. It's sort of an in-home respite. It could be 20 minutes of having the music, and that 20 minutes is very valuable to people when they're
Mhm.
all day, all night on alert. So they can make a phone call. They can turn their backs. So they won't worry about somebody going in the kitchen. Maybe both the person living with dementia and their caregiver, maybe they both have a listening to music together, or they both are listening to their own music on headphones separately. And so, it's very exciting. The NIH has just published a toolkit for researchers to study music and dementia, Parkinson's, and stroke. They want to have, even though there have been tens of thousands of studies around music and health and the brain, they'll say, well, sample size too small, didn't do this, didn't do that, didn't do it their way. So this toolkit, which I've been working on for years with like a volunteer group of 30 top researchers across all of the institutes, or many of them of NIH, put this together, and they just issued it in the last couple of months. They say, you do it our way, we will fund large scale research.
Nice.
And use our, use the biomarkers we give you, use your tests we give you, boom. And
That's
so,
awesome.
because they're excited. They know there's a ton of anecdotal, there's a lot of, research that sort of reflects this, but it's hard to capture a lot of stuff. So that's very exciting. So that's going to move it along. And right now they've allocated 20 million they've given out in grants for, music and dementia. So it's picking up
That's
speed.
fantastic.
Exactly.
But we need to get
Exactly.
this to be a standard, not just, woo-woo kind of stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Dan, do you
Ah.
have, because Patty and I for Brick by Brick Bonding have put together kind of a list of resources that can help facilitate connection with people with advanced dementia. And I think that I would love to be able to add just a simple, ideally a simple go-to place where people could come and find, like what we've been talking about. If you live in the UK, you can go to the Purple Angels, or you mentioned one in Toronto, where there's all these different places that facilitate getting these MP3 players to the people who need them. But are you aware of just a place that lists places you can go to?
This is really important to be developed. Sort of, there are national resources, and then there are local regional resources. And I know that AARP had put out during the pandemic, here are lots of resources, while you're home.
Right.
And, it might have been, but it didn't really define by geography or something, for brain health. And so I have it. I do have it written down. I mean, I have stuff I don't have sort of published. I could certainly give you or share.
Would love that
Here's
for
what
sure.
I know. Here are the programs that are going on now, around the country or whatever. And yeah, I mean, you have different music programs. Actually, let me just look them up real quick, and I'll just.
Good. And Sandra, before we come to you, that this will be posted out personally by me, and I'll be tagging you and trying to remember these names and look up NIH so that I will seem smart to the LinkedIn audience. Oh my goodness, she's just putting out all these things. And it's because you people are willing to come on the screen. Sandra has had to leap through flaming hoops to get onto the screen this morning. She has been working on it for 45 minutes, and
I had to call my husband long distance because he's up in DC and he's my tech person and normally gets all the screens the right way. And because anyway, I am sorry.
I'm glad you made it.
Hear some of you as I was coming in and out of the room, but it is technology is my highest frustration. Anyway, but
I just posted that NIH toolkit.
Okay, did you put it? It must be in the private chat. And,
I'm sorry. Okay. Well,
no, that is just fine. That's exactly right to do. So I'll be able to grab. In fact, my husband will probably grab it. Speaking of techie husbands, I bet you we're going to see the whole NIH and everything and popping right up here. Oh, this is great. I'm grateful. My husband put his phone number in the private chat going, if you're in there, I can help you. Look, there he is. Thank you so much. He's just been, I mean, this is almost a year now that I have been on Wednesdays with just a few exceptions of some pre-recorded ones that when I haven't been available, and he is just right there and right on it. So
and Sam is making a great impact. I mean, I just think bringing these experts together, as many as you do on a weekly basis, because I was hearing some of the conversation. This is a coalition of people who understand what it's like to be a caregiver, what it's like to be in that arena, and as well as the experience of witnessing people with dementia and the struggles that they have.
I just also put in the chat, it didn't really come out formatting wise, just the names of both organizational resources, but as well as the resources, music therapists are resources, smart speakers, live music, all these things are all part of it. It's not just any one way to deliver music. It's let's really mix it up the way we do. We don't just say, well, I only listen on whatever. But no, I go to concerts. Oh, there's a good concert here. I'm singing, whatever. I'm humming something. And Memory Tracks is an app, which is really interesting for anyone. And some of this is more nursing home assisted living oriented. Others are stuff that anybody can do. Vera at the bottom is an app out of Australia, which is involves a sort of feedback. I forget whether facial recognition or whatever, and some neat stuff happening.
Awesome. I wanted to address something that you had said earlier about how you're getting pushback. And it's so funny because I think with Laura and I, we talk about, using Lego and how sometimes we get pushback on that. It's with certain memory care communities, especially the big ones, I would get a lot of pushback. It's like, oh, if I go and tell my bosses we're going to introduce Duplo because it was made for toddlers, that for some reason it's like ageism, and I'm like, but this works, right? There's no right or wrong with building, and the colors are so attractive, and the minifigures and the animals, it really, really works. So I was wondering if you had any suggestions for us, Dan, because it's like when I introduce it to the to the Lego community, they're like, why didn't I think of this? But when it comes to non-Lego, people, for some reason they think, oh yeah, this is not going to work, kind of thing. It's really, really interesting.
Testimonials and survey and research. So, the people using it, I love this, but it has to be also people around them, their family members saying, this was great for mom. It resulted in A, B, and C. The facility, whoever you can get that's connected to that little success, that's your first sort of stepping stone, because that
Very
your
good.
testimonials are key.
Right.
Um,
Right.
Surveys, even if they're not research, massive kinds of, I mean, ultimately that would be great to have a research project, but even surveys of people, or, 50% of people said, whatever, or you can do some sort of research that's easy, quick and dirty research in the beginning before you go investing, time and energy. But you've got to do the first baby steps, because you got a real stigma issue there within how it's viewed. And I understand that. That's like, it all goes back to the whole question about language and how you talk to someone, right? That we see as sometimes an issue. But I think it's great. Like, I love with my grandkid. I love playing Lego, with her, and building stuff. I'm just off on my own. I build it up, she knocks it down, and I'm very happy doing that. And so I think about
Absolutely.
that, and I think, well, my hands are going at it, my brain. I mean, it's engaging. Just list the top 10 sort of actions that are going on cognitively, and then people can't respond to just, oh, it's a Lego, and that's the only word they have. You gotta even come up with a that forms a an acronym. You know what I mean?
Right.
And boom, 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 boom. Cognition, physical memory, whatever. Whatever you know this best. So that's as someone who's just the king of hitting my head against the wall. That would be my.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Sandra, does any of this relate to what I remember when I think of Sandra? Oh my goodness. At times I cross my experts. Like, I'll say something to someone and they're like, no, I did not write about that. And that's not what I'm about. So Sandra, help me out. Toxic Brain.
I
Am I in
wrote
the right?
a book. I wrote a book called
Thank you.
A Toxic Brain. And the book is really my personal journey with my husband, looking for answers, not finding them in conventional. We went through everything, all sorts of hospitals, specialists, gerontologists. No one, because it struck him at 59, no one really anticipated it might have been dementia. In fact, it was 3.5 years later where they finally agreed that it was dementia. So a lot of this was my journey for answers and finding that toxins were at the root, one of the major inflammatory agents that caused his neuroinflammation. And we had it documented because I was going to functional doctors who were doing the biomarkers, and so it was, but they still disputed it. Conventional still disputed that he was dealing with dementia, that they just thought he was dealing with psychiatric issues. And there were too many other things that would say this is not that what we are dealing with is, a dementia. And it took 4 series of neurological tests, neuropsych tests, until they determined that it was in fact a dementia. So
Sandra, that must have been awful.
Well,
3.5 years.
Detail was the looking for answers really took about 3.5 years.
Wow.
And once he was, and I looked everywhere for, and he was high in heavy metals. He was high in chemicals. His father was a leather tanner and he lived on the property. So for 20 years, he had long-term chemical exposure. And then mold and Lyme disease was detected through the biomarkers. And his inflammation was off the charts. What makes this more interesting, an interesting story for our toxic times, is that he worked on toxic tort cases. His career was focused as an expert witness and vocational rehabilitation consulting. So he was helping his clients get their lives, somewhat back together, at least financially, from the damages of water damaged buildings, sick building syndrome, asbestos, a lot of different cases having to do with toxicity. But when it came to his issues, they And he was working with some of the same doctors. It wasn't on their minds. So it was a very frustrating journey. But what I did learn is how toxicity is really now being seriously linked to neurological conditions. And just continuing with the link of Parkinson's, the link of toxic Alzheimer's, a specific type of Alzheimer's that is really inflamed from the toxic impact of, any number of toxins. And of course, we're now accumulating so many toxins on a daily basis that our bodies are not able to dispose of. And about, as I mentioned in the book, at least 25% of the population has genetics that make them poor detoxifiers.
Yes.
These are going to be the people that are very prone to getting neurological issues. Well, as it turns out, as a result of what happened to him, I had my girls tested because it's genetic. They also carry that gene. My mother was going through issues living in our basement at the time, which we did not know had mold in it. And she was found to have the gene. And then I was found to have the gene. So, and just because you've got that specific genotype, it doesn't mean that you're doomed. And I think that's my message now, is that there are things, they are reversing cognitive decline. And even more so since, the research continues, the patients and the practices around the country that are using the protocols that are helping to both prevent and reverse dementias. So that was really an important message that I wanted to communicate, because people are being slapped with labels. And, you can, if you get to the root cause, and that's the thing, that when you really understand that there is something, in my husband's case, his body, he just had such a heavy body burden of toxins. It wasn't a slow decline. It was like overnight.
Right.
And that's what made it so distressing, because he had all these symptoms. Yeah, the psychiatric, it's like, man, this was the most grounded guy. And, definitely he was indicating a different side of himself. But it was all the other physical symptoms, the connection of the gut and the brain. And that was not really factored in at all. So it's just a story. He's just one. He's like the canary in the coal mine that we've got to address. And this is my call to action. We have got to address, because there are tests, easy, simple tests, but they're not covered usually by conventional medicine. They're not looking for toxicity. It's not in their bailiwick. We went through all the tests, all the conventional tests of the MRIs and the CAT scans and the blood work, and repeated. And it doesn't show. And that's what makes it frustrating. It makes it frustrating for both those that are afflicted and they do not know what's happened to them. And as of course, loved ones, it puts everything in a spin. Life just, that morning when I found him in that state, it's like my life changed. It was forever changed, because, we were both consultants and he was out. He couldn't work anymore. I was, doing the caregiving, running him to the, different appointments, looking for answers. And so I just, I wanted to write the book to say their answers do exist, but you got to explore right now.
There was a news this morning. Yeah, I just heard a news article about a woman who had a traumatic experience, became catatonic, and they thought it was psychological. For 20 years, she has been in a mental institution, and they found out it was lupus the whole time.
Yes.
And once they treated the lupus, she came back again.
Yes.
It was for 20 years.
Yes, 20 years. Well, my husband also ended up, because the legal system makes it challenging. But anyway, he ended up because of a public disruption charge. I mean, I can't believe my husband would, but anyway, it was public disruption at the library. And so he was incarcerated, and he was sent to it. Once they found out what the real story was, that he had been out on his own driving a car with a brain that's not working. I mean, it's truly what I originally called this was navigating a neurological nightmare, because
Right.
that's really what it was. It's all people who are dealing with caregiving, and they're thrust into situations that they've never,
No.
their loved one has never acted that way, and now they're in a whole different reality. And and the frustrating thing for me is no one would validate that this was caused from toxicity. And it was only, as I write in the book, only because I had listened to a podcast from Dr. Brederson, who's the author of The End of Alzheimer's, that I found out about this toxic type of Alzheimer's. And I had the occasion to connect with him. And I said, okay, he was diagnosed with Lewy body 11 years into his illness. And now I see this toxic thing. And when I got the book and looked at all the characteristics of toxic Alzheimer's, it's like, yeah, that's everything he was. And so Dr. Brederson said, you can have different forms of dementia. You can have the tau tangles, and you can have the Lewy bodies at the same time. So, but it did legitimize, and his research legitimized toxicity. And that is why we need to address it. If we're going to change this billion, the amount of costs, the collateral consequences, but not drilling down to get to the root cause. That was another aha, is that someone doesn't have to spend their weeks or years, more like years, with caregiving, if we're preventing this in the first place, or we're able to reverse it, as people are now. There's wonderful testimonials of patients who got their lives back, just like the one who was diagnosed with lupus. And that is actually, if you think of all these autoimmune disorders, there's over 100 of them. And a lot of them will be linked to toxins. Like
what needs to happen
is linked to mold, but they're not checking, for unidentified bright objects for MS in your brain. So I've got a few of those. So I've had mold exposure. So, it is, but by addressing the root cause, it is a lot of lifestyle medicine now. It is, our diets, the food system has changed. We got to address the food. We got to address, the exercise, the sleep, the things that will help to turn around. But I think one of the biggest factors is drilling down to find out what's causing the inflammation, because there are probably now, I think they estimate about 40 different factors that
so Sandra,
Dan, go ahead.
Sure. You are an expert on this whole,
yes,
and it's representative of issues with other types of dementia, right? So, and toxicity it connects to a lot of things. Babies are born with 150 impurities,
right.
Poison toxins in the body, whatever. And but what would you suggest for this? For others who might be facing your path, what has to change? Is it the doctors being educated now? I mean, I know there's short, medium, long-term changes, right? That you probably could write, and your whole book might be just filled with suggestions of many things need to change. But because the systems go slow, and I was listening to some guy who ran just a conference with 2,000 people who run dementia trials of all kinds. And he was talking about like with this lecanemab. I mean, okay, so that's one drug but there are different types of dementia, and it could be, and it's complicated when you start looking at multiple variables, and it's going to take years and years and years to narrow down to toxicity, because that is a wildly complex, right? That's all of the. And so, how do we? If you were like to have your way, what would you push for now? What parts of society would be receptive, so that realistically, inside of whatever short number of years, there could be real change? So someone like what you've been through isn't on a merry-go-round.
You are absolutely
Mm.
right. And I include a chapter about, the evolving renaissance of what's needed. And that is, it's not just one system, it's the entire, it's like looking at our food industry. Why are we putting a lot of toxic ingredients into our foods? We have to, there's things that are being approved for use, like pesticides. They're not proven safe. and so it's long-term use, and what's going to happen, and because you can't get the link, it's like, if you do the chemical exposure, but a lot of it is the training with doctors. They do not get the training of toxicity for the most part. They will get acute toxicity, but chronic exposure to toxins that causes inflammation for years. I thought what happened to my husband was like an overnight thing. What happened to you overnight that caused so many of these things? It was actually, it can go on for decades, that this inflammation just is like slow burn, and then you can get an infection or something and it all explodes. But you're right. We need to look at our healthcare system. Living in such toxic times, we should have the tests are available. If they would make them available, cover them through insurance, and that's a challenge right now. And a lot of the functional doctors understand this, but they're usually not covered by insurance. So that prohibits a lot of people from getting access to where the answers really lie. And that's kind of where we are right now.
Does this show up in autopsy? For
The
people who-
the brains. I mean, that's what they told me about my husband, is that it's Lewy body, at the time. This was back in 2005. Well, he was diagnosed with Lewy body 11 years into it, so like 2015. And no doctor had ever considered Lewy body dementia. And yet I was, and I include a lot in those books. This is what I'm noticing. These are the characteristics. This is, he's got speech issues. He's got balance issues. He's got all these things. And they just kept drilling down, going down the psychiatric path. And they just wanted to keep him on medicine. And I go, those meds aren't working. I don't care how many different cocktails. And I had a whole list of them, of what they put him on. It wasn't addressing the root cause. It would never make him better. And I had to, 3.5 years into this, the state mental hospital thought, well, we'll just give him, the combination and he'll come back and he'll be fine. I said, this has been 3.5 years of trying every combination of drugs, and none of it's working. But the protocol for detoxification got amazing changes. And yet a lot of the doctors would not allow detoxification when he was being hospitalized. When I could have access to him, or if I had an assisted living place or a skilled nursing place that was actually open to us, and the doctor proved it, he got better. And it's like he got really much better. Now, was that because of that, or was it because of Lewy body, which I did not know at the time, because I didn't know he had Lewy body, that you can have these episodes of like cognizance, and he was fine for weeks, and then bam, that I did not know what I was dealing with.
Wow. I want to thank each of you, because you are all in this moment and in past times. The emotions are coming up again, and the reason why you're doing, each of you are doing more than just one thing, and you are trying so hard to make sure that other people don't have days, years, decades of, if only we had known, if I just had an inkling back then. This is also important. Sandra, you said something, and it almost disappeared in all the information you were giving us, and in all of how it affected people and affected you. there was one thing that you said, and that was, I heard a podcast.
Yes.
So for someone else, it's an article in the newspaper. It's
Right.
overhearing somebody talking in a waiting room and going, I never even heard of toxic Alzheimer's. What are they talking about?
Mhm.
This is why I'm doing this. And also, I'm going to pull up my card. My husband said, you should have a conference. And he said, in 2024. And so I'm having a conference in 2023. I'm going to do the right thing this year so that I can do this thing right
Yep.
in 2024.
Right. That's fantastic.
And my husband already has it scrolling at the
Very
bottom
cool.
of the
Beautiful.
screen.
October. All right. Wow. Jumping
And
into action.
all you have to do, well, see, we're just starting to build this. And so in person as well as this, I am not quitting this part. I know people are like, oh, I need a break or whatever. I'm just not at break mode at all on this. I'm like adding shows. I'm like, we need to have a spot for this. And we need to.
But by what you're doing, Christine, is bringing people together. Now, when I was on the show last time, Chris and I had a chance to talk with the Whole Care Network, and he introduced me to a number of people that I was able to do podcasts on their shows as well. So it's just, you're offering a forum, and you do not know who's going to be tuning in, who's going to getting just that one nugget of information, which can change everything.
That's right.
Well, if I could just throw out there as well, it seems like a theme that's kind of been thread through the conversation is just getting that word out so that people are aware of these resources. And so I did want to share, if Scott would put that up on the screen, there's a link to where you can download the flyer that Patty and I made that does list a number of really great resources. We'll be updating it with some of these music resources and some other ones as well. But these ones are really focused on, how can we connect and bond with people with advanced dementia? And they're just packaged in a really nice, convenient 2-page PDF.
And we already know that Patty's coming because
Love
she
that.
registered. Look at her clapping. And we call it playing with Legos. There's Lego stores and I don't know, cities and amusement parks. I don't know what all they have. But when I go into, I'm going to advertise them right now. Brick by Brick is your book. And there is a Bricks and Mini Figs place in Canby, Oregon. When I walk in, I see adults building.
Yes.
I see the children too, and they're interested and they're choosing, and it's delightful. I see adults building in there, and whether they are stressed out because they're going home to life after they work there or after they visited there, whether they have found a way to do that bridge building and that skyscraper design that they just didn't have the money to go to college for that. So here's their chance to be an architect. Whether this is an artistic expression. I walked in there. It was St. Patrick's Day, and I was wearing 7 different things that were green. And so I got to get 7 green pieces for free.
Nice.
And
Nice.
I'm just going, while I was in there, I was like having this conversation about Star Wars and Star Trek and what are the things that are available. And, and I mean, it was an opportunity to just be a human being and not too serious. And there was no arguments about the color of Klingon blood or anything like that. It was about, when you can find sets and who, is kind of doing the black market stuff on, if you get all these pieces, then you can build a such and such ship or something. It was fun. It was delightful. I remember that. And that was not this March. It was the March before. And I'm still remembering those moments and the conversations. And I'm just like, this is fun.
It's
And why
amazing.
wouldn't you want to? Tell me an older person who doesn't want to have fun anymore. I can think of one. They literally do not want to have fun anymore. And I'm not sure
Or
that they ever had fun. And maybe there's some who never had fun. And finally, they've got just enough things misfiring, if I can say it that way, that they're just like, oh, heck, I'm just going to give it a try. Let's see what I can build. But
Well,
she
for
and I are going to
those
be having conversations about what she is doing as part of this conference. I'm sorry, Patty,
Nice.
you're not just coming, you're doing.
Oh, absolutely. It's going to be a lot of fun. And for those of you who don't know, there is Lego communities all over the world. Just type in Lego user group near me and you'll find a Lego community, and they're the best. Absolutely. I highly recommend everyone joining one, because it's all about
Fantastic.
inclusivity and building together and just bringing out your joy and finding what interests you. So absolutely, I highly recommend it. So thank you.
Absolutely. This
Thank
is
you.
this to me, this makes sense. I live 10 minutes from a university where people who have both blindness and deafness
Mm.
are involved in the community, and I'm seeing them more often. We moved here less than a year ago. I'm seeing that community more often, and the people that travel with them. We've got a trolley. We live in the land of make believe. We have a red trolley that goes by every 20 minutes.
Mm.
And so I get to see communities and groups of people more often than some because of right where we live. And I think about those Duplos and those, that is something that is communication and, putting, because I see
Expression.
words being spelled into hands. And I'm just like, oh, please don't get neuropathy too. What will it be? But Dan, how do people get a hold of you who need and can still enjoy the auditory stimulation of their brain to interact with others? How do people get a hold of you?
You're
Oops, you are
muted.
muted.
Oop.
He was being polite.
sorry about that.
Yeah, you bet.
My email, dcohen@righttomusic.com, or the website, righttomusic.com.
RIGHT, right to music.
Yes.
You have a right to music. Laura, do you want anyone to get a hold of you?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. Probably the simplest to remember, just go to abcdementia.org and you can find my email address and set up a call or whatever. I'm also on LinkedIn. So happy to connect with all the great people out there who are forwarding dementia care and realizing that we're just all the same, all of us.
Yes, please. Thank you. Yes, absolutely. Sandra, do you want people to get a hold of you in any way?
Oh, absolutely. I have a website, sandrastrauss.com, and it lists the book on there. And I have a blog and, just things relative to a lot of issues that I encountered through the journey. Just, focus somewhat on toxicity, but then also the caregiving experience when you don't even know that you're dealing with dementia. That was crazy making.
Oh my goodness. There's brick by brick bonding. There's alive inside. There's toxic brain. There's, am I missing anything crucial? Because we
ABC
are
dementia.
over time. ABC dementia.
Yeah, focus
There
on
we
it's appreciating behavioral communication in dementia is what it stands for. And I really focus on, again, getting to the root cause of, it's not that these behaviors are the problem, it's that it's a communication and that they provide clues with which we can dig down and find that root cause and identify and address it so that we can all feel and function at our best.
Yes. Oh, wonderful. I'm glad that you all had this hour and 9 minutes. And let's finish out by all of us saying thank you to my husband who was busy back there grabbing all these things and
Thank
putting
you,
them on the
Scott.
screen.
Fantastic.
Thank you,
Thank you.
motivational
Thank you.
listener.
Oh, what a
Thank you, you
wonderful
guys.
group.
So happy
Bye,
to be with
everyone.
you.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
guys.